Motivation and discipline are such different things. I love sport. A lot of the mentors and mastermind classes that I've done in the last couple of years have been high performance sport people. They just have this really strong connection to all of the things that I believe high performance business, that mindset around training, performing at their best, the discipline that is required.
Welcome to the M26 FIT Podcast, where we explore the connection between having a strong mind and a strong body.
Today's special guest is Hayley Van De Ven. She is a multi-award-winning business owner, mum, speaker and mentor. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Magnus.
All right, to kick us off, just give us a little brief version of yourself.
Oh, thanks so much. So, as you said, I'm a mum of two boys. I do have a number of real estate businesses that I've had for quite some time. I started in real estate when I was 17 as a receptionist, and 22 years later, which sadly marks this as my 40th birthday this year, I have 3 real estate offices and a number of other businesses that sit beside my real estate business. I'm still married, can you believe it? And I think that's a huge win for me too, I think personally. But I really focus on, building our agents' businesses, working with our team on mindset, and creating something that's profitable and wealth inspiring for these guys to build their best lives.
Yeah, and I detect a touch of an accent there. So born in New Zealand too, I believe?
Yeah, I came over here to have a gap year when I was 17, thinking that I would work for a year, go to Europe and then maybe come back and do uni, but I left and never came back. So Australia is my home.
Yeah. Did you come straight into Brisbane or were you somewhere else first?
Yeah, I came straight to Queensland. My parents had friends that were at Bribie Island, so that was a really odd place to start, but an incredible opportunity to meet some amazing people and, forge the career that I've got now.
Fantastic. And I believe you recently joined the 5am Club. Can you give us a bit of a story around what started that and what are some of the benefits that you found in relation to that, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, awesome. Absolutely. I love that hour between 5 and 6, and I think as like a busy professional, I'd heard about the 5am Club my entire professional life, and I'd been like, screw that, I'm not getting up at 5am. Particularly when, my kids were young, I was getting up all through the night, and it was just a nightmare. I couldn't think of anything worse than my alarm going off at 5am. But now that my kids actually sleep through the night most of the time, when the birds start chirping on my phone at 5am, it is a beautiful way to spend the morning. I've really established quite a concrete routine of getting up at 5, writing my gratitude, spending some time doing some journaling, going and exercising and moving my body, whether it's a yin activity or a yang activity based on, what's going on with me at that time. The importance of listening to my body is something that I've really leaned into this year as well, just to kind of start the day beautifully. I think we also mentioned in our first catch-up I listen to some frequencies in the morning to kind of start my day on, its best kind of level, and it's transformed my life.
Just talk us through that, frequencies. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I went to Gwingana on a retreat. I needed to do some healing, and I really needed to forgive myself for, a couple of rough years where I really hadn't looked after myself, and I'd probably gone into some super bad habits, if I'm honest. And the time that I was there, I saw a kinesiologist in one of my appointments, and the fascination kind of grew. I reached out to a kinesiologist that I'd known, and she was a Reiki master and kinesiologist that had put me on this track. And she kind of set me up with these few frequencies to listen to. And at that time, I understood the science of it, and I thought, yeah, that makes sense. And it really aligns with all of my other beliefs around kind of, building my best life and, moving my body and, manifesting and, figuring out what was going to be best for me and what really resonated with my values. I've got to tell you, I love it. And it's now become, part of that morning routine, really settles me. I feel like it really grounds me, and it, sets me up for success for the day.
Fantastic. Now, I know that back when you were younger, you played a lot of competitive sport. Let's talk about just some of those similarities that you have from that competitive sport, competitive athlete and business.
Yeah. Look, I love sport. I've always loved sport. A lot of the mentors and mastermind classes that I've done in the last couple of years have been high-performance sport people. Like they just have this really strong connection to all of the things that I believe high-performance business, that mindset around training, around, like performing at their best, like the discipline that is required, not just the motivation, because motivation and discipline are such different things, that grit, that fortitude. Like I know these are all buzzwords, but they're things that, align so carefully between high performance business people and elite sports people. And when you talk to elite sports people, it's almost as though, you're just wired the same way. And I think to myself, well, look, I'm not a long distance runner. I'm more of a Clydesdale than a thoroughbred. But at the same time, like I look at that and the ethos is the same around the conversations they're having with themselves to break through difficult times. And in business, we experience lots of difficult ups and downs, and the conversations that you're having with yourself so you can pick yourself up and get back on the track. I love that. And I learn so much from them personally, inspired.
Fantastic. Now, I know one of your favourite sayings is trust the process. Let's chat about the role process has in your business and its importance on how you build, maintain and improve those processes.
Thank you. It's funny because anybody that does any type of disc profiling would probably pick up that, like, I'm an ID, like every day of the week. So process is not my natural jam. But, in this game, particularly after 22 years of like consistency, you understand that like process is actually the things that sells houses. It's not anything else. Like you think to yourself, oh, surely not. But you list the property, that's the tough part. The process of selling it is literally a process, and following it for consistency is really important to make sure that you're getting those high level results consistently over time. Otherwise, if you weren't following a process, if you were just hoping for the best when you popped an ad up on the internet, I can tell you sometimes you'd win, but most of the time you'd lose. Yeah. You certainly wouldn't create a repeat and referral business that feeds you for your future. So process is always something that's very integral in the real estate piece, but also in building like longevity in your business. You see it in lots of real estate businesses. Real estate salespeople will, go hard for a couple of years. They'll churn and burn. They'll make heaps of money and then they're gone and they'll vanish. And you think to yourself, what happened?
What a waste.
What a waste of talent. Like, was it they weren't committed? Were they not disciplined? Did they just burn themselves out mentally? Because that happens too. Sadly in our industry, there's a lot of drug use that happens off the back of, some of their fortune. They get a bit excited. They get a massive paycheck. They get a crazy cool car and, they sadly sometimes consume a shitload of cocaine. So, that can't last forever. I hate to speak ill of the profession, but it's not the profession. It's actually super, super common in any kind of high performance when they don't have that process of making sure that they stay on track and that accountability.
That is interesting because that leads me to my next question, which is about culture. So can you describe the culture that you've created, how long it's taken to build, its importance of running and growing successful businesses, and some of the challenges faced in tolerating certain behaviours?
Yeah. Culture is probably the most important thing in my business. And for business owners, they would think surely not. Surely profit is the most important thing in your business. I have a really core belief around the fact that if I create, the culture, that all of the other things will follow, like trust the process, as I keep saying. The process to me is quite clear. Find the best people in market, bring them all together, create somewhere where they'll want to stay forever, and, create an environment of success. That is our culture is of success and performance, but it's also, I have a no dickhead policy. Just don't be a dickhead. You think to yourself, surely that can't be that hard to run with, a whole bunch of professionals. But can I tell you, in a competitive environment, that can sometimes be a challenge. So having the consistency from my perspective is really, really important as well. Sounds incredibly boring. But when I bought the business in 2016, that was my first business. So I'd gone from being a salesperson for 14 years and bought the first office over at Morningside. That was my opportunity to create a culture You know, and it was a legacy business, the Remax Results business there that Deborah Evans had for like 26 years or something crazy. So we did inherit a team, and it did take me a little while to create my culture and my kind of version of what the business would look like. But in my second business in Mackay, it was a startup, and I got to create the culture from the ground up. So that was a completely different experience to trying to, you know, change like a little micro culture that was existing. 2.5 years ago, I bought another 2 businesses out on the Bayside, so at Cleveland and Alex Hills. That was, again, another big legacy business, but this was a large business. You know, I think there was about 30 or 40 agents and administrators and property managers in that business, so that was a completely different experience in changing a culture and integrating 2 cultures into one. So there was a huge change management process that went with that. And that was really about establishing those core values, as you saw in my office the other day when you walked around, and, you know, it's get shit done, build the world's best team. You know, there's so many things in that business that we've created that are my core values. And it was important for me to do that because then, you know, one of my other big things is walking your talk, right? So if you're going to talk a big game, you better fucking walk a big game. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast, but I get a little bit excited sometimes. But, you know, that's the thing, right? So it's like if you're going to talk it up, I'm all for it. Yep. Like, I'm your biggest cheerleader. I will have you back 110% of the time. But if you're going to talk a big game, you got to walk a big game. So off you go. Go and make it happen. And I think that's really important for me too, you know, having an understanding and a knowing in our executive leadership team about what our values and our leadership principles are, hugely key, because I can't always be everywhere, you know, and I need other people in our team to walk and talk those values and hold them so dearly that they won't just walk past them, you know. And I say it all the time, what you walk past, you know, you allow. So, you know, if it's rubbish on the floor, if it's the flag not out, if it's, you know, just small things, like my pet peeve is like crap on the reception desk when you walk in. And like, what is this? What is this crap? There's keys, there's paper. Like, you know, for me, that's kind of just a level that's not acceptable. So, you know, creating those, I guess, expectations in our business can be quite daunting, but even more so is upholding them because
that's the challenge, isn't it? It's a lot more challenging. Yeah. I think a lot of people, we're good at setting that process and setting a standard, but then, like you pointed out, it's so easy in the face of busyness just to walk past.
Yeah, and look, I'm not perfect. I know that half the time I walk in on my phone because I'm mid-conversation and I'll walk past something on the reception and be like, what's that? I'll come back and, you know, address that later. But my hope is that through creating great processes in the business and having that consistency and hiring right, also knowing who we're going to bring into those roles through, like, you know, personality profiling and ensuring that we have that culture of consistency, that, you know, we're going to have those other people that care as much as I do.
Was it a lot more challenging, obviously, the business that you created up in Mackay? You're able to set that standard from the get-go. And then, like you mentioned, the 2 businesses that you bought out on the Bayside, you've inherited, obviously, a large group of people, pre-existing cultures, pre-existing habits. Was that a big challenge for you to try and get that set back onto your standards and your culture?
I think challenge is an understatement, more so because I just didn't know what I didn't know. And they are the most incredible bunch of people, and they have taken the challenge to identify with our vision and our values for the business with 2 hands and run with it, which has been incredible. But I think I underestimated the work. Like, I didn't realise how much of me would be required to bring everybody in, and to create that, you know, one team, one dream kind of mentality. And it sounds really cheesy and I hate that, but the reality is that's exactly what we were creating. So it needed me to not only drive it, but to be present. You know, like, I've always had this ethos, like, about, you know, a leader needs to be seen to be believed. And so they actually, there's no point in me sitting in my ivory tower not talking to everybody. I'm not a natural CEO that can kind of lock the door and play with spreadsheets. That isn't, that's not who I am. I'm a people person. So, like what brings me joy is connecting with, like people and being present and being able to connect with them and knowing about them intricately, knowing that they're going through a tough time, seeing that they're not showing up as their best selves, being able to kind of get in at the ground level and affect change for them rather than seeing them spiral. I know lots of businesses are obviously run purely by numbers. Mine is kind of head and heart because for me, like I can often see that things are falling off the tracks before it shows up on their numbers. And I want to be in a position where I can, like double down with them and help them through that so that they don't, totally fall off the tracks.
Right. You mentioned success earlier. What does success look like for you and your team?
So we have some fairly kind of well accounted for metrics around success. So as you can imagine, in real estate, it's a very results outcome focused business. You either sold the house or you didn't. You got paid or you didn't. So success from a outcome perspective is very, very clear for us. But it's not always just about the money. For me, it's having like the world's best team, and it's having a place where I can go to work every day with a smile on my face. I can love being with the people that I'm with. I can draw energy, and they can draw energy from me, and we can be in a position where we actually, enjoy rocking up. I think it's weird, but I miss the team at Christmas time. I think that's so strange. I don't know how many other people do that, but for me, that's huge. It's, having that really tight team where we can kind of help each other up. We can help each other succeed. We can create, a business model that is collaborative, which in real estate is very rare. Having that, collaborative team approach to things is really, really important to me. I feel like that's businesses of the future, being open to sharing and actually not being afraid, to kind of lift people up inside your organisation rather than squash them.
All right, bit of a side shift here. So mental health, mental resilience, mental strength is obviously that's a pretty hot topic at the moment. How have you found that within your industry, your businesses, and is there anything that you guys do proactively to assist your staff in that world?
Well, it's something that I really believe in. I think that it's a really, really important topic in the real estate space at the moment, and there's some incredible people that have kind of championed a project called the Rise initiative, and that's real estate wide. But what that's also done is shone a huge light on mental health in our industry. I don't think that our industry is any different than many. High performance definitely comes with burnout. It comes with, the financial ups and downs, the stresses of having financial ups and downs. But it also comes with a huge, level of people that probably have to hide their depression. They might be going through tough times. They may be going through a divorce. They may be going through, different personal challenges, but they have to rock up and, put on a face every day. So I think there'd be a huge amount of people, not only in our industry, but in probably every industry really. It would be harder to hide it. No, it would actually be easier to hide it when you're sitting at home, working from home, it's just you and you're a solo. But typically real estate businesses are more people-orientated, I-type people that require team, they require energy, they require to be part of something. So for us, it was establishing that kind of, now it's time to come back to work, guys. COVID's over. I'm sure a lot of you enjoyed your solo. Let's get back in and be together. Now, they don't have to do that because most of my team are conjunctional agents, which is like what people would understand as like an independent contractor. And they don't have to be there. It's a business-to-business relationship in most of our businesses. But we wanted to create that culture and that awareness so that they wanted to be there. So, we've done things like Wellness Wednesdays. We would work out in the parks in the mornings. We would go on runs or do run clubs on a Saturday morning. Things that brought the team together. And the ones that were struggling, we kind of really brought them into the fold to lift them up. Thanks to the Rise Initiative and Domain, there are projects, within our industry where they can have free employee assistance program, which is like psychology sessions that are paid for by a major sponsor, Domain. And really what that does is you know, it gives them that opportunity to reach out to somebody that is on the quiet. They don't have to feel like anybody knows about it. It's completely confidential, but it gives them that opportunity to connect. Because often they know their community so well that if they were to walk into a psychologist or a therapist or whatever it may be, sometimes they can still have an association of, you know, fear and shame attached to that. Like, I have every coach under the sun. I've got a psychologist, I've got a real estate coach, I've got a business coach. Like, I'm all for that. I'm like, I think that's how you build out your best life and, you know, create your, you know, your best self.
Absolutely.
But again, something that's really, you know, I'm passionate about. So I hope that I can intervene for those guys.
What about, I've heard you use the term accountability buddy as well.
Yeah.
So what's that?
Yeah, so we have accountability buddies as well in our team. This is something that's optional, but, you know, opt-in, and it's really thriving in our business at the moment. Having an accountability buddy looks like somebody that you'd set your goals with and you would hold each other accountable to it. So, for example, with my accountability buddy, every morning I send her my gratitudes. So the 3 things that I'm grateful for, I'll send her some affirmations. I'll also talk to her about like my health and fitness goals, you know, and we hold each other accountability for work stuff too. Like, so we hold each other accountable, for work stuff too. So you're talking like, you know, your KPIs, the outcomes for the day. You might have 3 priorities for that day, things that you want to nail or knock over. For our agents, it might be making 20 calls. It might be setting 5 appraisals. It might be closing a deal. Like, they're 3 priorities that they can kind of be like, I'm not going to get distracted today by noise. I'm not going to stand around at the, you know, in the kitchen and talk shit for an hour. I'm actually just going to get in, get shit done and knock my 3 priorities off first. And I'm going to feel really proud at the end of the day when I can message my accountability buddy and be like, nailed it.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Now, just on the mental health again, is there anything that you could share personally, that some struggles that you've been through, and, you know, what are some of the things that got you through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really important piece to share with people, because often you see the highlights of people's lives on Instagram and you don't see the reality. Like, you don't see any of their lowlights because nobody pops that up. And often people don't really want to consume that content either, particularly if they're on like a, you know, one of my outs for this year was to get rid of the news because it was so depressing that I was like, I'm not going to watch the news in the morning. It's gone from my morning routine. So far, so good. Amazing. But I look at that and go, there's been times in my life where I've struggled unbelievably. I look at, you know, like, I've got 2 boys. I had no trouble with my first son. I got 5 months off, which was great. I got back to work and I was like chomping at the bit to get back to work when he was 5 months old. He was in daycare and I was back full time. Brilliant. Didn't get any sleep. Somehow just survived. Don't know how, just survived. With my second son, Geordie, I owned 1, maybe 2 business. Yeah, I had the 2 actually. I had Morningside and Mackay when Geordie was born. So I didn't have the same, you know, opportunity to have that time off. And he came back to work with me when he was 6 days old. He was in his little capsule and he sat beside my desk and I worked and he slept.
6 days old.
Yeah.
That's commitment.
It was commitment, but as a business owner, I didn't have any other choice.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, I didn't have the structure in place in my business and it was still in its infancy. So I didn't have probably the knowledge and the education, but I certainly didn't have the cash flow to just pop somebody in there as an interim CEO and, you know, run the business while I wasn't there. So I guess, like, I look at that and go, well, was that a contributing factor to the postnatal that I really suffered when Geordie was a baby? I had that for 18 months and I didn't even know it.
What were some of the symptoms?
You were just in this cloud. You really were,
Just a foggy.
Just an absolute fog. I think, you know, brain fog was probably a huge, big part of that. But also during that time, my mum had been diagnosed with cancer. She had a really short 9-month stint where she fought, you know, with chemo and radiotherapy, and we unfortunately lost her. You know, so all of those things combined with new baby, no sleep, you know, chronic postnatal, really, you know, fighting a losing battle with my mum just sat on me. And I remember, you know, when I went to Gwingana because I needed to do that healing and that grief, you know, processing, it was such an important part of moving on, but acknowledging, you know, the struggles that I'd had and knowing what that would feel like so that I could help anybody else that, you know, potentially was, you know, displaying those same symptoms. And when I look at it, like, the connection between Geordie and I now is incredible. Like, we're super tight. He's 5, so, you know, we can have a conversation and we can connect. But when he was a baby and he wasn't my priority and I wasn't sleeping and I was busy running a business and, you know, keeping a marriage together and looking after another baby, because one baby's hard, two babies, kill me now. Would not do that again if you paid me. People say to me all the time, oh, you're still young enough to have a third baby. I'm like, not a chance in hell. Because, you know, like that connection when they're a baby, that time, like I didn't breastfeed Geordie because, you know, I was straight back to work. So stress levels meant that I lost my milk straight away. So that only was in for 3 weeks. And I'm, you know, might be a little bit oversharing here, but there's an incredible amount of guilt that can sometimes come with, you know, like bottle feeding as opposed to breastfeeding. It may not be your perception of that, but the moment somebody says to you, oh, they're on the bottle, are they? You've gone from thinking that your decision was totally fine to absolutely second guessing yourself. And now, you know, like I look at both of my children and the way that, you know, they've both turned out. And I think, well, clearly it's made absolutely no difference to the way that, you know, they've kind of come through. And even more so, like I feel maybe having, you know, that postnatal with Geordie, that our connection's stronger now because I'm ensuring that I'm spending that time and investing it in the boys, where had we have not had that, maybe that would not be the case.
Gwingana retreat that you mentioned, just how long was that for? And just give us a brief description, because that's pretty full on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very full on. Everybody thinks it's like a fat camp, like they starve you there. They do not. There's a lot of food. But the things that probably killed me the most, and, you know, when I go back next time, I'm definitely going to ease myself in, was there's like no coffee, no sugar, no caffeine, no technology, because there's no reception there. And for somebody that's literally attached to my mobile phone, you know, that's almost that tech come down as well. You know, there's no carbs. It was a shock to my body.
Brutal,
but also a shock to my psyche, because, you know, like you have a headache, so you've got to have magnesium. I'm like, what about a Nurofen? No, there's no Nurofen. So things like that, you know, that it really gave me a lot of time to sleep. Like, I know that sounds wild, but, you know, like they had a set routine for the day, which was obviously based around your health and wellness and your education. But it didn't matter if you didn't show up because you were sleeping. That was what your body needed. So the importance of listening to your body, and then obviously treating your body, you know, there was some incredible treatments that I did while I was there, you know, just facials and, you know, massages and lymphatic drainage and things that you would think to yourself, you know, it sounds very luxurious, but it's probably what I needed at that time to kind of actually give back, you know, give myself that self-care, you know, and put myself first for a minute.
Self-care, that's so super important nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah.
So off the back of that, just how do you now juggle young family, obviously husband, multiple businesses? What are some of the processes or struggles and challenges that you come up with, and how do you manage it all?
Well, luckily, as we said before, I'm still married. It is my second marriage, though. Like, to be fair, everybody needs a practice husband or wife. But, you know, for me, I'm very lucky because I have a super supportive husband that is a great dad. And we do really share that load. So it's not, you know, like a traditional family where, like, you know, mum's responsible for everything and, you know, dad just comes in at 5 o'clock and sits down for dinner. You know, that is a huge benefit to me. There's no question about that, particularly when, you know, I worked away in Mackay and was flying backwards and forwards all the time. He really was the champion. But I look at, you know, that structure in the mornings, having that hour to myself, you know, going to the gym each morning or going for a walk, catching up with a friend. I try, like, I don't know if anyone's read Atomic Habits, but I definitely try to put that structure in place with going to the gym in the morning. So it was like, okay, I'm going to set the habit of going to the gym, but I'm also going to reward myself, you know, by having a coffee afterwards, and I'm going to make it compelling because I'm going to catch up with a friend. So I'm not going to let my friend down, which meant, you know, I would have that stability with going to the gym, and it just becomes a habit, obviously. That first hour of my morning being about me definitely changes the day. You know, things like, you know, routines like Coles Online, having your stuff delivered to you, having a cleaner. Like, you might think to yourself, that's really excessive. I couldn't live without my cleaner, because the last thing I want to do is come home to a messy house and start the afternoon with my boys on a really negative note because my head's scrambled because my house is a bomb site. And trust me, with 2 boys, it is always a bomb site. The cleaner coming on Monday, Wednesday and Friday just changes my life.
So speaking of habits, has there been any other habits apart from that, the 5 a.m. club? What else have you implemented recently that you can share with us?
I've probably implemented a lot this year. I think some of the main things for me were, self-care Sundays. So I do face masks on Sundays and, self-care stuff that I don't get time to do during the week. Sundays are really sacred to me because they're a family day, and you kind of think, well, how could you be juggling your family while you're doing your self-care? The boys do the face mask with me too, so they find that quite cool that they get to put on their little sheep mask and sit there with me. Dan rolls his eyes and walks away because he's just like, seriously, what are you doing to my children? I'm like, it's a new world, babe, embrace it. But yeah, that's also been really, really key. But building out, as we said before, and some of it's very woo-woo, but for me it's, doing that journaling, getting that stuff out of my head into paper, having my vision board, reading through it, reminding myself of what my priorities are, all of those type of centering stuff that just brings me back to, that weekly routine.
What impact, you mentioned you don't watch the news anymore, neither do I, haven't done for quite some time. Can you try and just explain what sort of an impact do you think that's had on your mental health and even your mindset from particularly first thing in the morning, that you're not listening and consuming that type of content?
Yeah, I think that's probably a feeling more than anything else. I think when you are intentional about starting your day on a really good note and, having a high vibe and setting a frequency for that whole day, the last thing you need to be doing is derailing yourself at 6 a.m., and I love sunrise. I used to sit there and chuckle. But what I would find is I'd also go to work thinking about things that didn't serve me at all. So things like, a war here, or, the next COVID outbreak, or, whatever it may be. And obviously these influences can have such a dramatic effect on your business, but they can also have such a dramatic effect on you personally and your vibe for the day. And I think, when you embrace the thought process that you're 100% accountable for the energy that you bring into the room, that if I'm going into a meeting or going into a one-on-one or going into the office and seeing everybody, I don't want to put my shit on them. I want to be able to bring in the energy that they deserve, which is, incredible energy to set their day on fire.
Absolutely. Now, goal setting. So here we are, we're into February. How do you guys go about setting goals personally and also obviously professionally for your staff? And then more importantly, just from the accountability side of it, what process do you have to make sure you're on track so you don't get to February and the wheels have fallen off and the momentum's gone?
Yeah, this is a really key part in building a business, and particularly in real estate businesses, KPIs and the metrics are really important because, the numbers always tell the story, and the difficulty that we have in real estate often is that people get really busy and they forget to fill their pipeline and then it falls out. So putting structure in place, and again, that process is important so that, you're smoothing out that ride. But probably more importantly from a goal setting and business planning perspective is actually having a plan, actually having a process, and then having the follow-up already pre-booked to make sure that you are staying on track, so that if you feel like you are falling off at any one point, that, not only your accountability buddy, but certainly me. Some people in our business, I meet with every week. Some people I meet with once a quarter. Some people I meet with frequently, but just off and on, depending on who they are and what they need. And I think that's driven by their personality type, but also their experience and what they actually need from me. Some of them, in the start of their journey require anything and everything. And sometimes, with some of our experienced agents that run super high performing teams, they need me to fix problems. They get a letter that's difficult to deal with or whatever it may be that could really derail their day and their time. They're better to flick that for me. I'll fix that problem for them and we'll move on very smartly. They'll never think about it again. And, for me, in the running of the business, that kind of stuff is very par for the course. Whereas for a salesperson, that could completely derail their day, their week, their year, because it's not in their wheelhouse. So, like having that accountability and having that value-based relationship with our agents is super, super important to kind of them having continued success, really.
I'm hearing, obviously, you're bringing up values a lot, so that's obviously very important. And like you pointed out, when I was in your office, you've actually got those plastered up around the walls.
Yeah.
Were they set personally, or was that something that you just set as a group?
Yeah, so our executive leadership team, we locked ourselves away a couple of years ago and figured out, what our kind of mission was for our business and then the values that would drive that mission. So it was really, really important for us to have like that North Star that we could look back to and be like, well, does this align with our values? Is this who we are as a company? And it not only gave me the ethos to kind of build out teams and the way that everybody would continue to act, but it also kind of set a bar of, again, what we would accept, what we would walk past and what we wouldn't. And sometimes that can be really hard because obviously, great people can do really silly things sometimes, but if we're really clear and consistent on our values, then it ensures that they stay on the right track. And if they don't, it can, sometimes just, be that little reminder to bring them back in line.
Awesome. Now, quick fire question time. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
The best decision you've ever made?
Moving to Australia when I was 17.
Most practical advice you've ever received?
My dad says things to me like, what's the worst thing that could ever happen? And then when you answer it, you're like, oh, actually, that's not that bad. So, like by breaking it down like that, and it's a really good litmus test, that was the best advice I've ever had.
Your worst vice?
Diet Coke.
Influential mentor?
I've got so many of them, but I'm really, really glad to call Tanya Titman and Sherry Storer, my friends and mentors. They've both changed my life.
Your go-to stress relief?
Run club.
What are you obsessed about?
This sounds really bad, but winning. Career
highlight?
For me, there's been a lot of career highlights, but definitely cracking that number one business in Remax Australia all those years ago. I feel like that was a huge career highlight, and it's been hard to beat that one.
Your favourite sports person or team?
The All Blacks. Still patriotic.
Your greatest fear?
Losing my family.
Life impacting book that you've read?
Legacy. That was an All Blacks book about their incredible team, like being the best team in the world.
One item on your bucket list?
I really want to go to Italy. Positano.
What are you most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for this incredible life that I have. I've created it and I'm really proud of it, but I'm so grateful.
Favourite song?
Karaoke go-to is I Love Rock and Roll by Britney Spears.
Top 3 success habits?
5 a.m. club. Knowing people's personality profiling and showing up as your best self.
Advice to a younger self?
Don't be so scared. Just do it.
Last question, question 26. Finish this sentence. I believe.
I believe in limitless possibilities.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Hayley. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know you're very, very busy and much appreciate all of your insights and your honesty and authenticity. Love it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate, being part of this, and I love what you guys are doing and your message. So congratulations to you too.
Thank you. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, we have a small favour to ask. Please take a moment to subscribe, review, and share this podcast with someone you think will appreciate it. Your support helps us reach more listeners, and we can continue delivering content that educates, inspires, and empowers you. Don't forget to follow us on social media to stay in the loop with all our latest news. 2024 is going to be a huge year. And we'll continue running our weekly Friday morning kayaking sessions on the beautiful Brisbane River, along with plenty more thrilling adventures, exciting activities and challenges are planned. We'd love for you to join us and be part of our growing community. Remember, success is all about consistency. And by investing 26 minutes exercising both your mind and your body every day, you too can become the strongest, fittest and healthiest version of you. So stay tuned and stay active.